Repeat after me. I open myself to love.
I open myself to love.
I open myself to joy.
I open myself to joy.
I am one, unafraid to become.
We believe
We believe there's one power, love, intelligence that creates everything, including each of us.
We each use that same power, love, intelligence
to create our life according to our beliefs.
Whatever that new experience is, whatever it is that we're intending and desiring, we are opening ourselves to it, each of us individually and all of us together.
Our new life.
Our new life.
Our new life begins with a new thought.
So here we are at the beginning of the summer, Memorial Day weekend, right? That holiday devoted to barbecuing, poolside parties, all that good stuff. No, actually, I was thinking about this a little bit and thinking, this is the holiday devoted to the remembrance of our veterans who have fallen in foreign wars, domestic wars, and any other wars. And I'd like to extend that to all veterans who have fallen in wars in our way to enlightenment as we go around trying to find a better way to live and a better way to negotiate things. So I'd just like to take a moment in honor. Are there any veterans in the room? Would you be willing to stand up? Is there anybody in the room who has family in the military? Or veterans? Would you be willing to stand up?
Family or veterans?
Yep.
Yep.
Anybody have any friends that are veterans or in the military? Yeah. So we all know people who have served, and I just want to take a moment and honor those who have served in the military services and those who have supported those who have served in the military services. Thank you for your service. Namaste. You may be seated. So this idea of service is one that has been near and dear to my heart, although I've never served in the military. I've had friends and family who have served in the military. It was not my route, and they probably wouldn't have taken me anywhere, because about the times I was old enough to be enlisting in the Army, I was enlisting in things that they don't really approve of. So we never joined our ways in that way. But this idea of service has so many meanings in our culture, so many ways that we look at it. And a lot of times it's transactional, and that's perfectly fine. I offer a service, you pay me to do it, it gets done, and everybody's happy, right? That's the transactional level of service that we go through in every day. Then there's a deeper level of service. There's this thing that we call selfless service, where we give of ourselves without an anticipation of some return on that giving. Yeah? Everybody do that all the time? No, not really. In the Hindu tradition, there's a word for this, in fact. It's called seva. And it's the idea of selfless service as a spiritual path. And it's a really disciplined idea. See, it's not about being transactional, but it's about looking at what we are doing in our lives as service all the time. So sometimes we can get in our heads and start dividing those parts of our giving of ourselves as, oh, well, that's not being service because I'm getting paid to do that. That's one way of looking at it. Or we can, and here's what we like to do around here, change our thinking about where we are in life and recognize that the gifts that we are giving, we can give in service and love in all times. And the discipline is not necessarily of that of saying, I will give 10% of my time to serve whatever charitable organization. The objective is to change our thinking always to to recognize that what we are doing is being of service to the world in whatever we're doing. And it can change the most mundane activity that we are undertaking into a sacred act. And we often can forget this. Anybody here actually wash dishes anymore?
No.
I actually enjoy washing dishes when the pile isn't too high, and I made some of them at least. Now think about washing dishes. You can look at it as an obligation or as a drag. Oh God, I gotta wash the dishes again. How many people here eat? Okay. So there's a mutual obligation going on here to some degree. Eat, wash dishes. How many here eat off the floor? Under 30 seconds? I'm good with that one. So generally, we're doing something with dishes, right? Cup of coffee, you don't generally drink it in your hand, you know. All these things where we have actually gotten something from this already, and then we can, but if we're looking at it as an obligation, it's a drag to do. Because washing dishes, like many of those activities in our lives, is something we do all the time. And believe me, after 45, 50 years of it, it gets a little repetitive and dull. Right? But that's an attitude. That's a way of thinking about what it is that we're doing in this simple act of washing dishes. So, when I live in a house with 6 other people, 5 other people, 6 other people, depends on the day. And generally there are a lot of dishes. And generally I'm not there all that often. I come home and there's some dishes in the sink. And I have 1 or 2 responses that I can do for this.
I love you too.
I can get angry, right? And start hollering about how come there are dishes in the sink and go on, right? And what I'm trying to generate there, right, is a transactional level of service from somebody else. I'm going to trade my peace for you actually doing the work. It doesn't work real well, let me tell you. Or I can change my thinking about it and say, here is an opportunity to be of service and express in some minor way the love that I feel for the people that I live with by saying, you know what, maybe I'll just do the dishes. Have you ever noticed that when you actually get to doing the dishes, it's not a terrible thing. You get this nice tactile sensation of soapy warm water and, you know, glasses and bowls. And if you really start thinking about it at a really tactile level, it's kind of calming. You're playing around in the water, you're accomplishing something, you know, and here you start with this dirty thing and it comes up clean and you rinse it off and you put it in the rack, you know, and you get done and maybe clean up the little mess around you. And all of a sudden you have this beautiful space that used to be irritating you. And in the process, what I've noticed in my life is I go from being angry to being resigned to being at peace with the activity. And so think about if we could, in every activity that we undertake, to start at it with this idea of I'm going to be in selfless service to those around me in whatever I'm doing, whatever the mundane task is. And how we can just continue to do that. And it's if we can keep ourselves out of that small self-ego that is screaming that I'm the one who needs to be served, and be of service in the activities that we're undertaking, we gain from that. There is a transaction that goes on in this. The transaction is we let go of our ego self and we move into this higher idea of living in love through a mundane activity. That's a pretty amazing thing if you think about it. Now, we all have chores to do in life. This is part of life. We have activities that we do that is part of being alive as a human being in this time, in this place. And in all times and all places, all of the things that are part of life that we generally take for granted, that we can turn around and actually create a disciplined thinking about this to bring it up as a sacred activity in each moment. There was that part, no, I'm not going to make a quote out of that, to pray without ceasing. When we are in the mindset of being in service all the time, we are praying without ceasing. Now, in New Thought, we have a tendency to play life in the key of me. Because we're always talking about changing my thinking. I got to change my thinking about this. And there's a lot of centering in the self to change the thinking that we live closest with, which is our own. And so some people look at us and say, well, that can be a pretty narcissistic kind of spiritual philosophy, isn't it? All you're ever talking about is you. Well, in one sense, yes. Because the only thing that we actually have control of in our lives is what we are thinking. And even that's marginal. We can direct our thinking. I don't know that we can really control it. I mean, have you ever been in a spot, anybody ever try to control your thinking? Large pink elephants. That's just a little example of controlling our thinking. It gets impinged upon by many, many, many things all of the time, most of which we block out. And the little bit we become cognizant of really kind of shifts what we're thinking about a lot. But we can direct our thinking more often towards this idea that I am here to be of service. And that's got a couple of key components. The first part is that we recognize that there are other people around us. That while we're all one, we have individualized in various assorted ways as unique channels of this oneness. We are experiencing life as the individual that we are. And as we get out of that idea of our physical limitations of oneness and get into this idea of we're all one, and bring that forward in our activities of being of service, one could actually say that you're being of service to yourself. There's an idea. Not as self-serving. Well, maybe self-serving. If we look at the larger picture of what's out there in terms of all of us together. Imagine a world in which we each took, let's say, 10% of our day and devoted it to being of service to other people. Would that change your life? Would that change your thinking and your activity about what we see going on in the world? Would that activate you to find something you wanted to share your gifts and talents and prosperity with? Be here next Sunday? But it does require discipline. And this is the sacred path part of it. Without the discipline to stop ourselves from going into the thinking of self-gratification and remain in this idea of giving of ourselves into the world, it actually requires that we remain aware of what it is we're thinking and then to act in accordance to this higher idea. Now, I know not everybody responds to life the same. We all have our histories and our experiences that have brought us to the point that we are at. So we're all responding a little bit differently to life. But we each have in us some desire, some calling to a greater ideal, to a higher idea of what this life could be. It's a natural thing to have some, we see it in the reflections that we see around us. So when somebody acts nobly, it can warm our hearts. And we feel moved by that. Anybody experienced watching somebody else act nobly and really just been moved to tears by that? That's our shared humanity. That's the oneness of life showing us how good we can be and giving us a higher idea of what we could do with our own lives. Maybe not in exactly the same way. Maybe not as the same words or the same activity, but in our unique way, we can share our gifts to the world as a spiritual discipline, as a way to continue to evolve into a higher idea in each moment, in the moment that we're living in right now. I think part of the reason that we don't do this on a regular basis, I won't say all of us don't do this, some people do, is that we get this, all right, I'll personalize this, so you guys can, if it resonates, you can deal with it. If not, you can say, man, is he messed up? The reason that I am not practicing selfless service in every moment is I have fear. I do not trust, and my faith is weak. And the reason that I say that is because if I had absolute faith in the goodness of the universe and the reciprocal nature of the universe, then I would give of myself freely in every single moment with all of the passion and love and compassion that I have within me, that I know is there because it has come out on occasions. Okay, so now I gotta ask, does anybody relate to that? Okay, good. Whew. That was a little work. The way that we overcome that fear is to practice these principles of service and love and compassion in our lives at every opportunity. And it builds a faith that when we give of ourselves, we are given back to crushed down and running over. And that's not a transactional sort of spiritual path. It's giving without ceasing to give. It's opening ourselves to be who we can be at that highest idea that we have all had at some point or another in our lives, to be that good in the world. And ultimately, what this path of sacred service, of seva, provides for you is an opening of love in your life. Because it is that love of the essence of who we are that we recognize in the people around us that allows us to open up without fear and go beyond what we think we could have been to that higher idea that we can all achieve. So I invite you, as you go about your week this week, think about it, because that's where it starts. Think about what you're giving in service. Think about whatever you're doing in any given moment and see if that actually lives up to that idea of being in service. I know you are, and so am I, and so it is.